Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the ShopNotes podcast, a weekly woodworking podcast where you can learn a little bit more about our favorite hobby. I'm your host, Phil Huber. Today, I'm joined by the usuals, Logan and John. Today's episode is number 47, can you believe it? And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about glues, one sticky situation. Thanks for listening.
This episode of ShopNotes podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Plans. You'll find nearly 1,000 plans covering everything that you'd want to build. From furniture projects to gift projects, kitchen accessories, workshop projects, and jigs and more. Find your next project at woodsmithplans.com.
Okay, so we were talking about topics for podcasts, which is always, it's kind of a weekly discussion of ours.
And, like 5 minutes before we turn the cameras on?
Right.
Yep.
Right. So, and then I think the funny part is since we discussed talking about glues, Becky says, is there something other than Titebond?
Well, I mean, that is part of what led me to this topic.
Yeah. Because, I mean, she's kind of not wrong. No offense to all the other glue makers out there.
It's like, do you want to go to the grocery store and get the bagged cereal?
Okay.
Aww.
No, I mean, it's a valid question because Titebond, I think, has so much of the market share.
Right.
However, this came up from a project I'm working on. I was actually looking for a very specific glue, and I could not find it. So that's why I wanted to talk about glues, what you have in your shop, what you use, when you use it, and why you have the glues that you have and why you've chosen them. Okay?
Yeah, because I think those are very different questions, because when you brought this up, I started looking around for what glues I actually did have in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
There are actually quite a few that I had, which I didn't think or remember, I guess. However, I also noticed that some of them I haven't touched in a good long time.
Yes. And so right now, obviously, those people are watching. I've spun a camera 180. My shop's almost clean enough I can show everybody, but only from here down.
Eyes up here, guys.
So I'm sitting here looking at my glue shelf. And you're right. I have a lot of glues that I have that I'm like, why do I have that? It's a brand new bottle. It's never been opened. And it's been here for 2 or 3 years now. So a little bit of background on why I wanted to talk about this. So I've been working on this dining room table, and a portion of that is these bent laminations. Okay.
Sure.
I for this table, I have went for these aprons, stretchers, whatever we're calling them. I went with a thinner lamination than I usually do. Okay, so usually I go to like a 1/4 inch lamination. I went thinner. I went 3/16. And the reason why I went thinner is I wanted a little bit less spring back. Okay, so thinner laminations with more theoretically should give me less spring back. Now, usually I build some spring back into my form, but I didn't do that this time for a few reasons. Long story short, I started looking at glue, and I'm thinking, okay, some of these glues are kind of flexible, right? Like when Titebond dries, I don't have any dry glue around me. I'm sure John does because you sickos wipe it under the bench.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Some under.
but when Titebond dries, it's actually fairly flexible.
Which
Right.
Titebond, though?
Well, yeah, again, another topic that we need to discuss. However, in researching some bent lamination, and one of my woodworking heroes, idols, you could say, has always been David Marks.
Okay.
And David Marks does a lot of bent lamination. And one of his suggestions for bent lamination glue is plastic resin glues. Okay. And plastic resin glues generally come in powdered form, and you mix water in with them. Okay.
Right.
For the very specific reason that they have a longer open time, which is good when you're doing bent laminations and wanting to get everything all glued up, especially if you're doing like super intricate ones with a lot of laminations, a lot of thin laminations, and that it induces less spring back because the glue itself, when it is dry, is more rigid, holds the shape more. It makes complete sense. I looked all over in Des Moines, the greater Des Moines area. I did not hit the Woodsmith store. It was after, I think it was after they closed, or else I would have driven out there. But Weldwood was the one I was looking for because I figured that was a brand that I've seen carried in stores. Weldwood contact cement mainly, but I was like, oh, they're Weldwood dealers. Maybe they'll have it. Nowhere had it. So I ended up using Type Bond 2 for my bent lambs, and it worked beautifully. They worked very well. But it made me think about, should I order a tub of that? And in what other applications would I use it? Which I think bent lambs are probably the only place I would use it. David, and it makes sense. David Marks said he doesn't use it for veneers because it's water-based, so it causes swelling in the wood fibers. So it can cause some veneers to do some weird things. But I use Type Bond 2, it worked beautifully. So I guess the question is, what glues do you guys keep and use? And when do you deviate from those?
Yeah, I'm just like your generic Type Bond 1 through 3. Usually Type Bond 2 or 3, just because that's what we have around.
You're a basic woodworker?
Yeah, I'm just basic. I see you guys use hide glue a ton, and I just have never gotten into that, I guess. I don't know.
You're not down with the dead animals?
I'm not. I'm like a vegan woodworker. So, but I don't know. Why do you guys use, like, what's so special about hide glue that you guys seem to use that a lot for assemblies? Just that it's slower drying and easier to clean up, or?
Mostly, yeah. I like the fact that I prefer to create my joinery that it's a little tighter fitting. Not overly tight, but I like to be able to lightly tap or use clamps, to draw, a tongue into a dado or a tenon into a mortise or something like that. So the liquid hide glue lubricates a joint more than a typical wood glue does, because a typical wood glue will swell the fibers and make it even tighter, which I don't want. Because eventually that water is going to go away, and I don't want the tenon to shrink again and then be a loose fit. So I like the fact that I feel like it's a little easier to clean up, either dried or still liquid hide glue. And I do appreciate the longer time, because I've learned over the years that I want to take my time during a glue up, but I also realize that there are plenty of times that I've overlooked something in the middle of a glue up and therefore need to make an adjustment on the fly or quick grab another clamp or something like that. So having that extra time makes it easier for me.
Yeah. And I agree with Phil on every one of those. There's two other reasons I like hide glue. The first is that it doesn't spot like normal glue does. So if you miss a dab on the surface, a lot of times it doesn't show up. Like a normal PVA glue will block all stain absorption, and you'll have this big white spot showing up on the project after you stained it. Hide glue generally doesn't do that. And the water cleanup, like Phil said, usually once I get a joint together and if I have squeeze out, I have a toothbrush on the shelf next to me that I just grab some boiling water and scrub that joint down with the water, and the glue goes away, right? So it's super easy to clean up. I also like the fact that I can repair it down the road. So dried PVA glue, like Type Bond, will not stick to itself. So if you have a tenon that pops out of a joint and you squirt more glue on it, it's not going to grab to that glue that's already dried. Hide glue will. So the hide glue will kind of reactivate the old glue that's there, and you can even reactivate it with a little bit of steam. So if you do need to knock a joint apart, if you build a chair and you have one rail or one leg that ends up loose, you can steam that joint and get it to come apart most of the time,
Right.
and then re-glue it. So it's an ease of use thing, in my opinion. However, that being said, the only failures I've ever had on a panel glue up have been on hide glue. I don't know if that is me starving the joint. I think that's probably what it is. I'm not using, I've been trying to, I know Titebond loves two-sided gluers, right? Like gluing both surfaces and then squishing it together because you're using twice as much glue as you need to, right? So
I think the sales guys like that. When we had Bob in here for those videos, he said you only needed to do one side.
Well, and this is actually coming from Bob at Titebond. I actually had a Mark Adams class with him on carving, and that's when I met Bob for the first time. And yeah, he's like, you only need to glue one side. We love people that glue two sides. The sales guys do. But he's like, you don't need to. So on that mantra, I've been trying to apply less glue to where I don't have as much squeeze out to deal with and clean up. So I think potentially the failures I've had have been, generally they've been like gluing up wide panels, and I'll just have one end that comes a little loose. So the boards kind of pop apart. I think it's me starving the joint of glue. So I'm not going to say it's hide glue's fault, but I think it's because I use hide glue a lot. So I guess that's probably where my main issue is.
Okay.
So do you, I guess, when you guys step it up and go to Titebond 3, outdoor projects, I think, are kind of a given.
Yeah.
Does well on dark woods too, just because it dries darker. I mean, if you're looking for that or whatever, but I don't know.
Yeah. I would call Titebond 3 my other glue.
Okay.
And I would use that on, a project that's going to, maybe on like shop projects that are going to be in my unconditioned garage. Like I know liquid hide glue probably will be fine over the long term. And I had actually emailed Bob at Titebond about that very thing. And he said it's probably okay, but I did that. Cutting boards, my dad over Thanksgiving gave me a cutting board that my mom really likes using. This one right here. And it had a couple of glue joints that were starting to fail. So I ripped it apart and re-glued it and used Titebond 3.
Sure.
So to me, and this is just from my own woodworking experience, I don't understand Titebond 2. I can see like the original Titebond for people who want just the regular wood glue. Titebond 3 for the waterproof glue. Titebond 2 as water resistant. Once Titebond 3 came out, I guess I just question why that product still exists.
That's all I use for Titebond. Is Titebond 2. Like, I'm not joking. I'm looking at I have 3 bottles of Titebond 2, 1 bottle of Titebond 3.
Yeah.
I guess why have Titebond 1? Right?
True. I mean, I don't use regular wood glue. I mean, that's kind of your standard yellow glue. But like I said, I wherever I would have used Titebond 1 in the past, or your, like Loctite made of yellow glue and Elmer's and whatever.
Yeah.
That's where I use liquid hide glue now.
Sure. Yeah. And I would agree with most of my projects. That's what I do still.
Yeah.
And I do like the Titebond hide glue. It has, I think, urea added to it to keep it in a liquid form. I also am very fond of the Old Brown glue. It's a little thicker. Yep. Exactly. One Phil's holding up for you guys watching on the tubes.
Right.
And I like that. It is a little thicker. So what I have found is that, especially when my shop was in the garage, I often had to put it in a pan of warm water to get it warm enough to use during the cooler months because it does gel a little faster.
Yeah.
So I guess on that note, what other glues do you guys make sure you guys have on hand in your shop?
If we're just talking about tight bond, I've always liked their quick and thick or molding glue or whatever it's called. Yeah. Phil's got it all there.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just
now we know where all the glue in the shop is.
Hey, I brought these from home.
Yeah. So just like what it said, like molding and stuff that you need to just tack quickly. It doesn't need to be, super strong. You're just trying to get it in place and hold it together. That's always handy to have around. And what's the new one that they have that's kind of this, it's quick drying, or trying to look around to see what we have. Because it's definitely not quick and thick because it's a lot thinner.
But it's still high tack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that bottle they sent us, it's made for like industrial manufacturers, right? Where it has like a UV fluorescence in it where you can shine a UV light on it and see where it squeezes out. For kind of industrial settings. I always make sure I have more super glue than CA glue. I have more CA glue on my shelf than I would ever speed set. Absolutely.
Speed set.
Yep. I have more CA glue on my shelf than I would ever admit to anybody. in every different viscosity. I have a handful of bottles of the gel, handful of the thick, handful of the medium, and a bunch of the thin. As a turner, I use the thin as a finish occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But I also recently purchased, and I don't have it. It's in my fridge actually, out down here. I purchased some of the. Oh gosh, what's the brand? Oh, I'm gonna find my accelerator. Oh, I can see it. The Star Bond glue.
No.
I don't know if you guys have seen, and if anybody listening is on YouTube or whatever, I see a lot of the Star Bond ads for their they have different viscosities. They have like a black tinted CA glue. They have a brown tinted CA glue, a light brown, and then I bought some of their accelerator and stuff. And that's kind of my new favorite super glue.
Mm-hmm.
I used a lot of the black on the poker table I built. That's actually why I bought it originally, because I had some walnut occasionally gets weird like black lines in it. It's almost like a pith line, but it's not a pith. So I used it to fill some of those instead of black epoxy, and it worked beautifully. And I love their accelerators. Very nice. What I really like is that they also sell these little pipette tips.
Mm-hmm.
Which is super nice. So I've kind of started relying on that as my CA glue. And I know our friends over at Tight Bond do make CA glues. I've never used them. I don't know if you guys have.
I've used some just because we had some in the shop.
Sure.
Here at Woodsmith, so I've used it in that sense. I don't use instant glue a ton. I don't know. I used to have a few bottles at home for repair stuff around the house, but as a woodworking thing, I don't really use it all that often.
Yeah, it seems like you get a bottle of it and use it a couple times, and it just kind of crystallizes up if you don't use it very often. So, but I bet you use it a lot for turning. But like you said, I keep it around to, repair stuff. But
which I have found that keeping it in the fridge, which is actually the Starbond stuff does say, I think, keep it in a fridge. I actually got that from my buddy Jimmy Clues. He has all his bottles in his fridge in his shop. That seems to help the crystallizing, because you're right. I would guarantee you, if I go through my glue shelf right now, which I'll spin my camera around so people watching can see my glue shelf, it's right there.
Okay.
So I got a bunch of glue, bunch of high glue, a lot of Type Bond 2, one bottle of Type Bond 3. I would bet that most of those are probably crystallized up. Some of those are crystallized up. I know that, but I do appreciate it not only for the repairs, but for some. I've used it to harden threads before, so threads
Sure.
I've cut in wood. Um, uh, I made a jig for the lathe in the shop at the studio, and I used the infinity wood taps to tap a hole into this block of wood that I was basically putting a rod in to make a depth gauge for gauging the depth of bowls, and squirted some glue in there. And it works phenomenally. It's like I have a brass insert in there, but way easier than a brass insert, in my opinion.
Right.
So, how about epoxy?
Yeah, epoxy is probably, I don't know, is the other glue that I keep around that I actually use.
Sure.
I have it's a 5-minute epoxy. This one I've had for a while. It's speed fast, or what is it, stick fast?
Yep. Yep.
And I like it. I got it in bigger bottles because I just feel like the little, I don't know, syringe tubes ended up getting gunky after a while,
Yeah.
and I wanted something for gluing similar materials together. If I'm trying to put aluminum into something or brass, or I feel like I get a much better bond than I would with like a CA glue.
Sure. The one thing about epoxy, and this is something I learned from Bob at Taiwan, is epoxy is the only true void filling glue. Right? It is the only glue that you can put a loose tenon into a mortise and have that joint be as tight as it would be if it was a good fitting joint with epoxy in it, because it will fill the voids and harden, and you have a good strong joint. You can't do that with tight bond 1, 2, 3. You can't do that with super glue.
Right.
So, and it's interesting because I know Matt Cremona up in Minnesota. Some of you guys might watch him on YouTube. He uses epoxy for almost every glue up on everything.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me. And I might try that on this dining room table I'm building, simply for the fact of the open time on it. We have, Phil, you mentioned yours is 5-minute epoxy. I also actually have a couple bottles of, I have the Loctite brand 5-minute epoxy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I do like getting it in those bigger bottles because you're right, the little tubes suck. And I think it's actually more expensive per ounce than getting the big bottles.
Right.
But it's kind of intriguing to me on using it like a normal wood glue, right? Like,
yeah,
gives you super long open time depending on the epoxy that you buy. The tensile strength is significantly higher than wood glue, which in of itself is stronger than the wood generally if it's a glue that isn't contaminated or have frozen or anything. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I might try it, see how it works. I feel like the cleanup could be a little problematic.
Yeah, to me that's the big thing, is that any squeeze out just turns into, it feels like you're gluing your project together with maple syrup. It just gets everywhere and is sticky and whatever. So it stinks, and I don't know, to clean it up you're using acetone or denatured alcohol, and it just, kind of the fumes and whatever. I think that's part of the reason that I gravitate toward the hide glues, is that it's a little less toxic than other types of glues. Like I know the old brown glue, so that this doesn't come off as just a strict tight bond love fest, is actually animal protein. Whereas I think the tight bonds liquid hide glue is synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's actually animal protein, although it's the same proteins that an animal glue has. So,
it's funny. I actually was just reading, and I think it was Old Fine Woodworking. They were talking about the old brown glue, and like the guy that makes old brown glue still makes it like in his like bathroom.
Yeah.
Like it's not a commercialized process. Like the guy is still mixing up the hide glue in a double boiler, like in his spare bathroom, and he just flips the vent fan on and bottles it up. Like I love supporting somebody like that, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty funny because I followed the guy who makes it, Patrick Edwards.
Yep.
He's out of San Diego, and yeah, he's a big proponent of animal protein glues, and started making it because he knew that, it's just not necessarily convenient for hobbyist woodworkers or a lot of woodworkers to have a glue pot and to go through the prep time involved with, soaking hide glue and then heating it up and keeping it at the right temperature and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
so
I mean, maybe if you're going to spend like all day in your shop and you liked it, like liked using it, I could see it, but yeah, you're right. It's just one of those things. Like I don't want to mess with it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, what are your guys' opinions on polyurethane glue, or what most people know as Gorilla Glue? Do you like using that in the right, or no?
I think if it died, I would not care. Wouldn't even send a card.
See, I like the challenge, sometimes in the right situations, and like it's foaming up everywhere. And
I don't know that that's the right like selling point for it. Like I like the challenge of using it.
Yeah. It's like, can I get this just right so it doesn't get foam everywhere and have to clean that up? And
no, I mean, to be fair, I think that there is because it's also an outdoor glue, right? So Type on 3, and the polyurethane glue are the two, and epoxy are the three outdoor glues. I had one bad experience with it, and I'm so afraid to use it again. I don't know. And I know that that was probably 20 years ago. I was repairing a chair for my grandpa, and he had tried to glue these spindles together with polyurethane glue. So it was probably the original Gorilla Glue. And there was just foam everywhere, and it was rock hard. Could not get it off. It was just miserable. And I think now they make low foaming polyurethane glue, correct?
Yeah, I think it does.
Sure they do.
Most of the ones out there don't foam quite as much as they used to. I don't know. I used it when, I don't know. Yeah, it is probably about 18, 20, 15 years ago when Gorilla Glue kind of took off and had a big blitz. And I got some, tried it out. I mean, I didn't mind it so much, but again, it was one of those things where it was just kind of a pain to clean up, in my opinion. And maybe it's just part of the learning curve of using it, and if you stick with it. Because I know there's some, like, who's that one guy does a lot of veneer work, and he does all of his veneer with polyurethane glue. And it's like, for real? I don't know.
So I'm looking at the Type On website because Type On does make polyurethane glue as well. And their sales, or features and benefits, I don't want to say their sales pitch, but the features and benefit is that it's 100% waterproof.
Yeah.
It is epoxy-like strength, so with no mixing, solvent-free, excellent sandability, bonds to virtually anything. Now, this is one that's interesting to me because I believe the first time I ever used it, I felt like it needed to be in the clamps forever. It is only polyurethane glue to combine a long 30-minute working time with a short 45-minute clamping time. So it may dry a lot faster than the previous formulas have, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. See, I think I used it recently when we were doing those, the bird feeder for the TV show. And I had to glue up some pieces of cedar to make the wider panel for the bottom. And I think we had that Type Bond polyurethane glue. I tried it, and it did dry pretty fast and didn't foam a lot. And it was just a flat panel, so it was easy to clean up. It's not like I had all these intricate joints and whatnot to scrape around and drip.
Now, when you used it, John, did you have to wet the joints first?
I did. I don't know if that was in the instructions or not.
Okay.
That's just traditionally what you do. I took it over to the sink and just rubbed some water on the joints, and I didn't read the directions, but
because that is that is one of the things with polyurethane glues of the past, and maybe I should look at them more now. Is that you had to wet the joint, right? You had to dab water on the joint. There had to be moisture for the polyurethane to activate and foam and adhere. I'm actually going to stand up and grab. I have a bottle of Gorilla Glue that's unopened, so I'm going to read what that says.
Okay.
There you go. We'll wait.
Don't worry, I got it.
Welcome to the podcast where we read the directions
Labels.
on glue bottles.
Yeah. What are the real directions?
Yeah.
So this is an original Gorilla Glue. Bonds virtually everything. I don't know if there's. Well, it's still liquid. Yeah. So it says moisture content. If below 10%, so if what you're gluing is below 10%, so this is toted for wood, stone, metal, ceramics, foam, glass, and more. So if you were using something to add low moisture content, dampen surfaces with water. So, and it's 80% cured in 1 to 2 hours, full cure at 24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would think most wood would have enough moisture in it to activate it, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to put a little moisture
air
on
dried
the
for
edges.
sure.
Yeah.
Air dried for sure. Kiln dried if it's at 7-8%, you might need to moisture it. The Gorilla Glue sales pitch, I don't know if you guys can see that there. Those 3 bars up top says damp it, glue it, and clamp it. Those are the 3 steps, and then foam all over your hands.
Yeah.
See, and I think that's where I ended up switching to Tight Bond 3. Is I was working with I was making some cutting boards years ago for Christmas presents, and I was doing quite a few of them, and had started off using polyurethane glue, but then one of my kids wanted to help me with it, and with the polyurethane glue, it was just like, I don't need glue on fingers and getting in mouths and all that kind of stuff.
So reading this, it says, clean up. And I don't want this to come across that I'm hating on polyurethane glue. I just haven't used it recently to see if it has gotten better. Reading this ancient bottle that I have, it does say, wipe wet glue off project immediately with a dry cloth and or paint thinner. Cured glue can be removed with a chisel, scraper, or sandpaper. And then see first aid for removal from skin. So,
right. Yeah.
I think one of the first times I remember using it was something for the TV show quite a while ago where we were doing like some sort of bent lamination. So it had probably, let's say, 8 laminations, and it's like lathering each, layer with glue and then the next layer. So you can imagine the amount of squeeze out and foam that ensued from that. And it was quite the mess.
That was either the coat rack, that bent lamb coat rack, or the fishing net. Because I think when we moved studios, we still had one that it was glued into the form.
Right. It was, I think that was like the first attempt where it was like, oh, that was way too much. So I think it might have been the coat rack.
So I guess the question is, having just did a bent lamination this last weekend, I always cover my bent lam forms with packing tape, with cork and then packing tape, right?
Yeah.
If this adheres to everything, does it mean it sticks to your packing tape?
No, I believe that it still releases from packing tape.
Does it? Okay. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know if it would or not. I mean, there's, I guess, a little give because there's cork underneath the packing tape, so you could probably pop it off, but no bueno.
Yeah.
I'm still going to give the powdered plastic resin glue a try at some point.
Yeah. What is it's like Unibond 800 or something like that? I think it's one of them. And
and I think that's one that David Marks says. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it would be interesting, especially with it being water based. Kind of seems to be a cool little thing. Mixing it up and using it. I think it has a pretty good open time. So he says the one he uses mainly is Unibond 800, but then the DAP weld wood plastic resin glue. So interesting.
I mean, I think on the old TV show set, we had a couple of like vintage containers for things, and I think one was an old hide glue container, and then we had on the back bench was an old casein glue.
Yeah.
Sure.
Container, which was a powder that you mixed with water. But the casein, that's derived from milk, like from milk paint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that would be kind of interesting to have tried that at some point too, because that was supposedly pretty durable.
Which that would still be considered a protein glue, right? Because it's a casein protein.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, same thing with who's the there's a guy that works over at the Luthier Supply, Stu Mack. There's a guy that does a lot of their YouTube videos, and he's a luthier and a guitar repairman. He uses a lot of fish glue, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what the benefits of a fish glue versus like hide glue would be. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it's thinner than the hide glue is.
Yeah.
So
do you use that for marine operation or,
Yeah, outdoor.
Yes, I think
outdoor.
so. Yeah, yeah, it's waterproof.
Water repellent.
It's the only waterproof hide glue.
Yes.
Oh man, John, when you hand somebody else the cart in Walmart, do you say "I filled her up for you," or "I kept it running"?
Yeah. I think you're required to.
I think so. As a dad, I think we are required to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, to throw a little disclaimer in here, of course, Titebond is a sponsor of the Woodsmith Shop TV show.
Of course.
And I want to recognize that because I know people will likely comment about it, but there are reasons that we use Titebond, and there are reasons why we have Titebond as a underwriter for the show, and that's because we use it all the time. So,
yep.
And I've just always liked the product in general, and I think we alluded to it earlier. I mean, you can find Titebond everywhere. You don't really have to go looking for it.
Yeah, that's that kind of. I'm not terribly brand specific on most things, so I kind of get whatever's there. And at Menards, Titebond's what's there.
Right.
And it works. I mean, it works great. But for like this project I'm working on right now, I bought a gallon jug of it. There's no other glue that they have at Walmart that comes in a gallon size container. Yeah. So, it's nice to be able to get the gallons, fill up my little, whatever size it is, the smaller tube size, and save a little money.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So. Okay.
Cool. All right. So how are you coming on your table?
Table's coming good. I got all my laminations glued up this weekend. Like I said, very little spring back on it. I got I cut the laminations at 89 inches. Okay. So they're 89 inches long, about a 5-inch deflection in the center. So the ends dip about 5 inches. And I got maybe a 1/4 inch spring back in total, which is completely workable. I'm not concerned about that spring back at all. So my next steps, I have my legs are actually sitting right back there behind me on my table saw. My next steps, I got my short rails cut that are not bent; those are straight. My next steps are going to be taking the laminations and cutting the ends, which I think I'm going to do on the form. So I think I'm going to clamp them down to the form, and then cut them on the miter saw to length. And then I'm going to do floating tenons to connect them. And I'm going to use our new horizontal mortising machine to do that, because I think I can hold those laminations in the form again, which is great because this form kind of gives me a plane to work off of.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to do that. That will hopefully happen. This won't happen this weekend. This weekend's deer season in Iowa, so I'll be busy. But yeah, so that's coming along really great. It's been. I like building tables because they seem like a big, intimidating project. They're 4 legs, aprons, and a top. I mean, they're pretty dang simple. There's not much to. There can be as much to them as you want, but for most tables, they're pretty simple, so they go together really quick. After I have this form built, I mean, I could whip out another one of these tables pretty quickly if I wanted to, which is really fun. So it doesn't take that much time. I have been working on my shop cleanup. I'm getting almost there. I moved my lumber storage to these racks back here, which is really cool. I was thinking though, I can fit an 8-foot board on the top rack up there.
Right.
However, behind my head is this little sliding barn door, and that thing opens up to what was my dog kennel. I mean, it's still a dog kennel. It's just under the stairs. I thought about building a rack that I could slide. I could fit like 12-foot boards in there.
Oh, nice.
However, that's
you got to get them down there in the first place.
Well, yeah, and that's such a long board to work in my shop. I don't know that I want to mess with that. So, so the shop cleanup has been coming pretty well. I did have I can't believe I didn't mention this last week. I had a listener of the podcast send me a message on Facebook, and it's like, "Hey, I know you buy and sell hand tools. Do you happen to have a jointer plane that I could purchase?" So I ended up saying, "Oh yeah, I actually had a number 7 and a couple number 5s. I think are the last things on my shelf. That is the to restore and sell pile." So there's still more there, but hand plane wise, that's what was there. So I actually ended up, I believe it was Steven asked me to do that. So I ended up doing a tune-up restore on a number 7. And God, I know I've said it before, but holy crap, I love 01 tool steel. Sharpening it. Like I cleaned up this thing and put an edge on the blade, and oh my God, it just sharpens so nicely. So I did that. That was a fun little side project last week. It stretched over a couple of days between soaking the plane, getting some of the gunk off of it, and refinishing the knob and toe and stuff. But yeah, that should be hopefully to him here in the next day or two. I was going down to Alabama, so it was kind of fun. So yeah, nice. Still working on. You guys can see all my little storage totes back here, the little storage drawers full of fishing tackle. There's a bunch of them. And I was there this over the Thanksgiving holiday, and I discovered my grandpa had a hoard of plexiglass.
Oh, yeah.
So now I have there's probably 40 sheets of plexiglass. So it's like I never need to buy plexiglass again. So
that's worth a lot of money these days.
I know.
Sneeze guards and
the plexiglass in conjunction with the 805 pounds of lead that I brought home the other day. So yeah, so I was like, oh, never. Now I have no excuse not to put plexiglass on every jig I build.
Right.
So yeah, or picture. I mean, to be honest with you, I use plexiglass for when I'm doing like picture frames and stuff too, because having 2 children and 2 cats, picture frames find their way onto the floor quite often.
Right.
So anything that can avoid breakage like plexiglass, I try to. So
in the apocalypse, you're ready for like personal sneeze guards, and you have plenty of material for lead balls for your musket, and
that's
just disappear into the woods.
Yeah. Although, last week I said that maybe there will be some fishing lures in the near future. I think that's what the plexiglass was actually for. My grandpa is technically on quarantine right now, so I haven't been able to ask him. I'm assuming he had that plexiglass to do like lips on crankbaits.
Right. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. So which is kind of cool. It's all fairly thin. It's all between 16th and 1/8 inch, which makes me think, it was crankbait lips. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of been my fun little projects for this last week or so. Yeah.
So are you planning on building your own chairs for your dining table? Or what
I am, unfortunately. So Phil and I have talked about this in the past, that there's not many people that you build a table, right? That's one project. Chairs are 6 or 8 individual projects. I mean, you can kind of get in that production style for building chairs.
But if you do, you got to be hyper organized, though.
And look at me, I'm not hyper organized. Actually, my shop's usually very organized. This has been driving me nuts and causing a high level of anxiety having my shop a disaster, especially because this is where I come to work every day now. I sit at my computer here, and it just causes me anxiety. But yes, I am planning on building my chairs. I have a Thomas Mosher, again, inspired design that I'm going to be building these chairs out of, or building these chairs based on. For the short term, I'm actually going to use some chairs that I have for the table. I haven't decided on what style, I take that back. I've decided on the style, and the style has a curved rail around the seat. Okay, so if you think about a seat pan on a chair, the sides are straight, the back is curved. It's all one continuous piece. And I actually messaged you guys a couple weeks ago saying, hey, how would you guys tackle this? Would you guys do this with steam bending? Would you do this with vent lamination? And Phil said vent lamination, which I think is probably the safer bet, because with some preparation, vent lamination is pretty, how do I want to word this? It's pretty predictable, right? Like if you have good lam preparation, you have good form preparation, you can knock out the same shape time after time again. Not having a ton of steam bending experience in this scale, I don't know. I kind of want to try it, simply for the fact that I only had 8 laminations on these rails I did. I hated doing them. It's like you go to the bandsaw, you resaw them, then you go to the planer, plane them down, then you go to the drum sander to sand them down and get them the final thickness. It was just very tedious. And I kind of want to try the steam bending thing on the seat rails, and if I do, I will probably try it once and prototype it just to see, just make sure it's going to work how I want. And I actually was watching a video last night. There's a guy I like to watch on YouTube. His YouTube channel is Ishitani Furniture. He's a Japanese furniture maker. And he had a video actually of steam bending seat rails. I mean, exactly the same thing that I'm looking at doing. Yeah. His were really thick though. Like he was taking a piece of ash like this thick. I mean, like 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, and bending it into a U shape. And he had this really cool setup where, and I'm sure if you've ever watched like a Welsh stick chair or a Windsor chair maker, they'll do the same thing where they'll steam it, put it in a form with a steel strap around the outside.
Right.
And then like one person will be pulling it and the other person's clamping it. The Ishitani Furniture, he was using, he had 2 come-alongs, a come-along on each end, and everything was screwed down and bolted to his bench. So he'd put the piece in, and then I think it's his wife. I'm not sure, but I think it's his wife was standing there winching the come-alongs, at the same speed as he's applying clamps. And I'm like, this is perfect. This is the perfect couples activity for my wife and I.
Right.
So I don't know how that would go. But yeah, I do kind of want to try it. We'll see. But yes, I will be making the chairs. The longest answer to your question that deserved a short answer. Yes, I am planning on making the chairs. So
I can't wait for the podcast week when there are 9,000 chair parts in the back of the shop. It's like,
that's right.
These are all the back legs. These are all the front legs. These are all the side rails.
Yeah, well, and that's honestly something to consider if you're going to build chairs, right? Like this table is going to the C8. So I feel like I need to make 8 chairs. I mean, obviously my wife and I only need 4 for us 2 and our kids, but I feel like I should make 8 chairs to match. That's 16 back legs, 16 front legs, 8 back rails and 8 seat pans, basically. I mean, that's a lot of parts. So there's a small production mindset you got to get in there, to knock it out, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. So I will not be doing the upholstery on them though. I will source out the upholstery. I have done it. I don't like to do it. I'm not good at it. I will just bite the bullet, find somebody here in Des Moines that does upholstery and let them upholster. I think I'm gonna do the seat cushion and a back cushion on it. So
Okay.
Maybe you should talk to Matt Cremone about batching out chair parts for
yeah.
you.
Well, it's funny because I've been talking to Matt. I think we're actually going to get a couple of his chairs in to do like a review on them in an upcoming issue.
Okay.
And it's funny because he's actually, I mean, and I think he'll be the first one to tell you, he's not making them.
Right.
Right. He's getting them they're his designs from a company that actually makes chairs for a living. I mean, that's what they do. It's a company that manufactures chairs for restaurants. So
nice.
I could ask him, people, I don't know. So, but it would be different if I was doing all wood chairs, but since there's some fabric on them and stuff like that. Plus, I need to get enough walnut stock. I don't think I have enough walnut stock here for all of them. I might, but I don't know. I do have 2 logs to cut, but God, I need to hurry up and get them cut if I'm planning on doing chairs out of them.
Right.
Or I did actually drop off a load of lumber to a kiln here in Des Moines last week, I think, which was kind of cool. Kind of cool to see their setup. They're a bigger sawmill operation on the east side or west side of Des Moines in Adel, Bear Creek Hardwoods. And they have 2 sawmills that they run. They have a Baker hydraulic, and they also have like a swing blade type mill. It was a very interesting mill I've never seen before. It had 3 blades on it. So 1 vertical blade and then 2 horizontal blades that were smaller. So you basically roll the log into it, and every cut, it cut the top and face of the board. It was very interesting. But anyways, they have a kiln out there that I dropped some lumber at that I'm going to bring down to Vegas with me.
Yeah.
So I guess that's always an option too, is finding somebody to kiln dry it. But I don't like working with kiln dried walnut if I can help it. So So yeah.
Okay.
So now I took up half the podcast. John, what are you working on?
Well, I was just talking to Phil about this earlier, that it's like the temperature's finally dropping here, and like my shop's out in the detached garage, and I didn't realize like how big of a baby I would be about going out there in 40-degree weather. I just haven't got my winter coat on yet, my winter layer. So it's like I haven't been out there much in the last week and finding other stuff to do, but I don't know. I need to figure out something about either heating it or at least getting it up above 50 degrees or something. So
yeah, well, it's interesting how if our listeners have never been in a climate where it does temperature swings like this, like in the springtime, the first day it's 40 degrees out, us Iowans are running around in our swimsuit, outside. It's like it's still so warm. But on the flip side of that first, like today it was 17 degrees out this morning. It was cold. I was like, holy crap, I can't get warm. I'm sitting in the car with the heated seat on, temperature turned all the way up. My son's yelling, I'm hot, Dad.
Yeah. Which is why I'm doing the podcast in my work office and not in my shop. Because
that's true.
It's one thing if I'm out there and it's cold and you're at least moving around. I mean, you're still cold, but.
Yeah. Or we'll get to January, February, and it'll get above 30 degrees. And it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. I can go outside without a coat and sun's shining. And so it just takes a while to get used to it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just me.
Yep. So your next project is building a shop heater?
Yeah.
Okay.
A wood fireplace.
Okay.
Well, it's funny. So, I mean, back on this Ishitani guy, he's like, his channel's great. He doesn't talk at all during it, which coming from somebody like me is weird, right? Like, I like to talk. But it's very zen, his channel, just because it's just him working. But he has a sawdust burner where it's a sawdust fireplace, not fireplace, but like a wood burning stove.
Yeah.
And he puts a tube in the middle, dumps sawdust in, tamps it down, and then lights it, and it burns. It's like, God, that'd be great use for all the sawdust we produce.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want a wood burning fireplace in my wood shop, but
back to our insurance related podcast.
Right. Yeah. I kind of wish I had a wood burning stove out in my garage. I think that would be kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, yeah.
My brother had one in his house before he moved. It was an old one that I think my dad used when I was a kid, just for supplemental heat in our house. But again, it was all dismantled, and I'm a little. I mean, I think I would be pretty responsible with it, but I don't know.
So what you're saying is, if I find a free wood burning stove on Craigslist, will your wife allow us to install it in your garage? I can make this happen, Phil.
I'll have to get back to you, but I think
All
it would
right,
be tons of fun because I would love to do a wood burning stove.
So the question is, though, if you have a wood burning stove, and this is not, I mean, I'm not saying you're a wood hoarder or anything. I mean, just in general, if you have a wood burning stove, are you less likely to collect scraps?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think so, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So,
And I've gotten a little better at it. I mean, my sister bought a house not that long ago and has a fireplace in it, and now at least I feel a little easier about getting rid of some scraps because I know, hey, I can bring this back with me when I see my sister, or I know Chris heats his place with wood.
yep.
So, I've been known to bring in a couple of bins of stuff for Chris. It does make it a lot easier because otherwise it just feels like you're throwing away potential.
Yeah. Well, and it's like this weekend, some of the walnut I was using on my table, when I dropped the tree, it cracked where it hit another tree. So some of the boards had these big cracked ends. So I was like, I don't want to mess around with bringing that into the shop. So I cut it off, and I was like, I could use it for a little project, or it could just go in the fireplace right away. So it went in the fireplace right away. And you're right. I mean, it does make it easier to just throw it in the scrap pile when it's like, oh, hey, I can get nice and warm and toasty on that 17-degree morning.
Right.
So,
yeah. Anyway, so I'm working on, like I said, this cutting board that I got over Thanksgiving from my dad, for those who are watching on the radio. It's an odd construction because I'll try and take a picture of it and put it on the show notes page, but it's not only laminated side to side, but some of the pieces are face laminated. I don't know if you can see that very well on there.
Interesting.
You can see.
Yeah. It's like a cabinet shop was using all their scraps, and it's like, hey, if it's not thick enough, let's glue it to the other not thick enough stuff.
Right. And then they turned it into a cutting board. It's a nice size. Sometimes it's really nice to have a larger, generously sized cutting board. So like I said, I used a bandsaw to rip apart some of the glue lines that were starting to fail, and then jointed it up. And I think those two glue lines that I re-glued have got to be some of the tightest jointer work that I've done in quite a while. It was pretty
hand jointer.
Not this time.
Oh. I saw you bring that in the other day, and you had your number 7 on it.
Yeah, and I did take a couple of swipes on there, but
sure.
So, although I will say one of my New Year's resolutions for this year was to get better with my hand jointing, and I have.
Good.
But I've also found that getting better at hand jointing made me a better power jointer user, if that makes any kind of sense.
Interesting.
So, it's
skill gained by osmosis.
Something. I don't know. It just
I made that up
maybe knowing more of what I'm looking for.
Sure.
To see how to get it. So anyway, I have that glued up, and then I want to resurface it a little bit. On the one side, it's just got your standard knife marks, a couple of stains or whatever. Before my parents got it, at some point, somebody had set it on a stove where it was a little too warm. Mm-hmm. So there's a pretty deep scorch mark on the backside, and I think it had little feeties at one point. And I know you're kind of a cutting board needs feet person, Logan.
I have rubber feet if you need some.
Well, so anyway, I'm gonna clean that up and have that. I mean, I'm not gonna see my parents for a while, so I don't really have a rush on it. But it's sometimes with a project like that, it's better to just get it done rather than have it loiter around. So, and then I'm still working on some Christmas projects.
Sandpaper on it. So
see, there you go.
feed that bad boy through there.
Win-win.
Yep. Yeah. How did your Christmas projects go or presents go that you handed out?
Yeah, they were very well received, so that was kind of
Awesome.
fun. For the TV show, we did a bird feeder project that was an over-the-top one, and I made one for my mom, and she loved it. Loved it so much so that she's still debating on whether my dad's going to be allowed to put it outside or if it has to be inside somewhere.
The birds have to come in to eat.
Right. Yeah. I think we were joking about that. She'd fill it with birdseed and then put it in front of their big picture window in the living room, and it just be like a tease, and you just have all these birds smacking against the window.
To be fair, I mean, we know your dad.
Yeah.
He just needs to make a second one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There you
I
go.
don't see a problem with that.
So I know that he occasionally listens to the show. So word to the wise,
There you go.
And then the camp kitchen that I made for my sister, she loved.
Awesome.
Though I did run into one snag that totally drove me up a wall. So I had it, and it's a big, impressive thing to have wrapped up in wrapping paper. She opened it up, nearly
You
burst
wrapped
into.
it?
Oh yeah.
Oh jeez.
Unwrapped it and was practically in tears over it. And she had just recently got a new camp stove, the very one that I had thought that I had modeled everything off of for it to fit in that upper opening. So she ran downstairs, grabbed her camp stove, put it in, and went to close the lid, and the lid wouldn't close on it. So according to the website, the dimensions said that stove was only 4 inches high, and I had a pocket that was 4 3/4 plus, almost 4 7/8 deep. So then I had the inset lid on it for people who saw it on the photos from last week's show notes page. So I had plenty of space on the inside, but when she went to close it, that thing is more like 4 5/8 tall, which makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to have to remake the lid so that it is an overlay lid instead of kind of being inset. So not a huge deal. It's pretty straightforward to do, but still was kind of a bummer. But
yeah, it just means you have to get back up there before camping season rolls around.
Right. Yeah.
So
I do have a couple of other gifts that I need to make for my kids and for my wife, but I think, like for the other side of the family, I'm all set for that.
Nice.
Which feels good. And even so that I've been able to add a few projects to get in before the end of the year, which is always fun. And I feel like I've gotten into a bigger groove on getting out to my shop and being active on stuff like that. So I feel I'm a much better person when I'm in my shop more often. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband.
Yeah. Being able to sneak away. I sneak away a lot to go do the sawmill and all that jazz, but being able to sneak into the shop for a couple hours on the weekend, I agree with you completely. It's like I'm so much more calm. It's like I'm not snapping at my kids.
So
I come home, ask my wife what she wants for dinner. It's just everybody's happy.
Yeah. So I wanted to make I haven't made anything for my kids recently, and I wanted to do that for this year, but it's tough coming up with woodworking projects for teenage-ish kids.
Well, didn't you make your daughter a nightstand recently?
Yeah, I did. That was in spring.
Sure.
So that's one thing. They kind of have a lot of the standard living in the house furniture of a desk, bed, bookcase. So unless I want to replace one of those items, those are kind of off the table. So. But, I was really struggling with my son. Like, what do you make a preteen boy?
Slingshot.
Slingshot. That your wife would approve.
No, then no.
Let's just get a bunch of blanks glued up and we'll start turning Mandalorian helms. Like full size.
Yeah.
No problem.
So.
And I know they're both avid listeners of the show, so you can't say what you're going to make them.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think I've decided on a game controller stand. I've seen a few online.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
So not something actively used, but would still be a kind of a reminder that making stuff out of wood does play a role in your life, which I think is important for me to communicate. So
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because I don't have any plans to make anybody Christmas projects this year. Last year I did just a big huge batch of cutting boards. God, so many cutting boards.
right.
And there is only one thing that I might make some chopsticks for my family that I know would appreciate and use them.
Yeah.
But the only other thing that I might potentially make is also like game controller related. I've seen a couple plans for desktop. I say desktop; they're like 2 feet tall. Arcade games.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where you do like a Raspberry Pi type controller, so you can basically load every vintage arcade game onto this one little unit, and it has the joystick controller and the buttons and everything.
Yeah.
I might make one of those if I can get the parts put together and ordered in a reasonable amount of time. I might make one, or it might turn to a birthday present, but that has kind of been on my list for quite a long time to make for somebody that I know.
Yeah.
So it might come to fruition. So
There you go.
and that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, that would definitely be fun.
So
okay, well, I think that wraps up another episode of the Shop Notes podcast. Thanks for listening. If you know any other woodworkers who would enjoy listening, feel free to send them a link. Also, wherever you get your podcasts, we'd love to hear from you and giving us a review, a thumbs up, a like, or whatever it is that you do. It helps us to get more woodworkers like you listening to the Shop Notes podcast. If you want to see what we've been talking about, we're airing the show on our YouTube page. You can also find it at woodsmith.com/podcast. So we'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.
This episode of the Shop Notes podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Magazine. Woodsmith Magazine has been the trusted source for all your woodworking information for over 40 years. From tips and techniques to furniture projects to shop projects, you'll find it all at Woodsmith Magazine. Subscribe today at woodsmith.com.
I like how Logan has his professional podcast set up and Phil and I are using our elementary school media center headphones.
it's not a competition.
Right.
No, it's not really.